Hey, this is Tony from the Cold Case Project, where we focus on unsolved cases across the United States. Our mission is to bring attention to these unresolved mysteries that need your help. All the information we cover in these cases is readily available on the internet, but we rewrite and repurpose it for the purpose of these videos. Our goal is to spread the word about the thousands of unsolved cold cases still out there. Thank you for watching. If you want to help shed light on these cases, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Your support can make a difference.
April Nicole Geyer and Rosanna Forham seemed like an unlikely pair of friends at first glance. But despite their differences, the two young women formed a bond, perhaps over the hardships they had both faced in their young lives. By 1998, April was a 21-year-old single mother, struggling to cope with depression after the tragic drowning of her boyfriend the year before. Meanwhile, Rosanna, who was only 15, was navigating the challenges of adolescence in a tumultuous household. She and her younger sister, Jamie, were being raised by their single father in St. Cloud, Minnesota, after their mother left the family in 1997 to move to Texas. The two girls, despite their 6-year age gap, found solace in one another, leaning on their shared struggles and forming a close friendship. On an August night in 1998, April and Rosanna left April's apartment in Milaca, Minnesota. It has been suggested that they attended a party that evening, though that detail has never been confirmed with absolute certainty. Whatever their plans had been that night, what is certain is that neither of them was ever seen or heard from again. Their sudden disappearance sent their families into a panic, but initially, authorities were hesitant to view their case as an urgent matter. After all, both girls had run away together before. However, in the past, they had always reached out to their families to let them know they were safe. This time was different. Days turned into weeks, and when a full 7 days had passed without any contact, the initial assumption that they had simply run off started to shift into something far more troubling. April's family had deep concerns about her well-being, particularly in light of the personal struggles she had been facing. Her depression had been severe in the wake of her boyfriend's tragic death, and her behavior had been increasingly unpredictable. She also had a young son, whom she had left in the care of her mother that night. This detail alone made it difficult for her loved ones to believe she had left voluntarily. Meanwhile, Rosanna's father, who had already experienced the heartbreak of his wife abandoning their family just the year prior, was utterly devastated. He refused to give up on searching for his daughter, even as hope began to dwindle. As police began to investigate, inconsistencies arose in the timeline of the girls' last known whereabouts. Some reports stated they were last seen on August 12th, while others cited August 10th, August 14th, or even as late as August 17th. The most commonly accepted date became August 14th, a Friday. It was confirmed that the two girls were together that day, having left April's apartment in Milaca on foot. But from that point on, details became murky. Some rumors suggested that they had attended a party, though no concrete evidence ever surfaced to support that claim. As the search for answers dragged on, frustration mounted. How could two people simply vanish without a trace? About a year and a half after their disappearance, a major development in the case surfaced. An informant came forward with a disturbing account of what he claimed had happened to April and Rosanna. He alleged that on the night of August 14th, he and a friend had picked up the girls while they were hitchhiking. According to his statement, they brought the girls back to the friend's house, where things took a horrifying turn. He claimed that his friend strangled both girls to death before enlisting his help in burying their bodies near the Leaf River in Wadena County. Authorities took this tip seriously and launched a massive search operation in the area identified by the informant. Using search equipment and cadaver dogs, they scoured the landscape, even digging up enough ground that it altered the natural flow of the Leaf River. Despite their exhaustive efforts, nothing was found, at least nothing that law enforcement has ever publicly disclosed. Rumors circulated that an item belonging to Rosanna was recovered during the search, but this claim has never been officially confirmed. The question then arose, was the informant telling the truth? Or was this another case of someone injecting themselves into an investigation for attention or ulterior motives? Law enforcement acknowledged that the story was plausible, but without physical evidence to corroborate the informant's claims, no charges could be brought. Some speculated that he may have been trying to reduce a sentence for an unrelated crime by providing a fabricated confession. Others wondered if he had been partially truthful but omitted his own direct involvement in the crime. If his account was accurate, why had he done nothing to stop his so-called friend from committing such a brutal act? And why had he suddenly decided to come forward all these years later? If the informant's story was false, then what truly happened to April and Rosanna? Could it have been a case of them meeting the wrong person at the wrong time? Had they been caught up in something dangerous at the party they may have attended? April had reportedly been involved with drugs, which raised concerns that she and Rosanna might have encountered someone with ill intentions that night. But with no leads, no physical evidence, and no witnesses stepping forward, the mystery of their fate remained as elusive as ever. One of the most chilling aspects of this case is that Rosanna's father experienced what he believed to be a supernatural sign of her death. 2 weeks after she vanished, he was jolted awake in the middle of the night by what he described as his daughter screaming his name. The experience was so vivid, so unsettling, that he became convinced that he had heard Rosanna's final moments. From that point on, he no longer believed that she was alive, but remained determined to find her and bring her home. Over the years, the case has remained frustratingly stagnant. Despite efforts from both families, law enforcement, and occasional media attention, there has been no concrete breakthrough. Rosanna's father has never stopped searching, holding on to hope that one day he will finally learn the truth. Every year, on December 3rd, he buys a birthday cake in her memory, refusing to let her be forgotten. Theories about their disappearance continue to circulate. Could they have run away, only to meet with an unfortunate accident? While unlikely, cases of missing individuals being discovered in bodies of water or hidden wreckage years later are not unheard of. Or perhaps they were abducted and killed by someone whose name has never even entered the investigation. If so, where are their remains? Could their bodies be buried somewhere undiscovered, or were they disposed of in a way that left no trace? And then, of course, there is the lingering question of whether the informant's confession held some truth. If it did, why were the girls never found despite extensive searches? Both young women left behind devastated families who continue to seek closure. Rosanna Forham was only 15 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was described as a Caucasian female, 5 feet 5 inches, weighing 110 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. April Geyer, who was 21, was biracial, Native American, and Caucasian. She stood at 5 feet 2 inches and weighed 140 pounds. She had a peace symbol tattooed on her left middle finger and a winged heart tattoo on her left shoulder. She may have last been wearing a black, oversized t-shirt with biker shorts or jean shorts. To this day, law enforcement remains open to any leads regarding their case. Anyone with information about the disappearance of April Geyer and Rosanna Forham is encouraged to contact the Mille Lacs County Sheriff's Department at 320-983-8250 or the Minnesota BCA tip line at 877-996-6222. Julie Hill was reported missing by her mother on July 18, 1980, after she mysteriously vanished from her hometown of Duluth, Minnesota, under unsettling circumstances. She left behind her 2 Doberman Pinscher dogs, her purse, all of her personal belongings, and even food cooking on the stove in her apartment, located in the 2800 block of West 3rd Street. The door to her apartment was left open, giving the appearance that she had stepped out momentarily, expecting to return within minutes. However, she never came back, and no note or indication of her whereabouts was ever found. Police launched an investigation that spanned decades, but for years, Julie's case remained a disturbing mystery. Then, in the spring of 2004, investigators turned their focus to 2 specific addresses in Duluth, one in the 200 block of West 9th Street, and the other in the 1100 block of Hammond Avenue, both of which were properties owned by Donald Lewis Bloomer, a man whom Julie had been dating at the time she disappeared. Julie had lived with Bloomer for a time, but had moved out shortly before she went missing. Their relationship had been tumultuous, marred by multiple incidents of domestic violence. When police searched Bloomer's properties in 2004, the renewed scrutiny seemed to push him into a confession. He admitted to causing Julie's death, claiming he had shot her at his 9th Street home on the day she disappeared, but insisted it was an accident. According to Bloomer, he then disposed of her body in a wooded area west of Floodwood, Minnesota, near the St. Louis-Aiken County line. Following his confession, authorities charged him with second-degree murder, and Julie's family also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him. Investigators went to great lengths to find Julie's remains, even going so far as to demolish Bloomer's 9th Street home in search of evidence, but nothing of significance was recovered. The lack of physical evidence and Bloomer's claim that the shooting was unintentional led to a plea deal, and in October 2005, he pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. His sentence was shockingly lenient, just 3 years in prison, with credit for the 13 months he had already served while awaiting trial. Despite the legal resolution of the case, Julie Hill's remains have never been found. Her mother passed away in 2003, never knowing what had truly happened to her daughter, but the rest of Julie's family continues their search for answers. Due to the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and Bloomer's confession, authorities firmly believe foul play was involved. The case remains open, and investigators urge anyone with information to come forward. The Duluth Police Department can be reached at 218-730-5400. Sources for this case include the Duluth News-Tribune, WKBD8, Fightline, and Namus, all of which have helped keep Julie's story alive in the hopes that one day, her family will finally learn the full truth of what happened to her on that fateful day in July 1980. Karin Aad was last seen at approximately 7:30 p.m. on June 1, 1992, when she left her home to play in Skyline Park near her family's residence in Edberg Grove Heights, Minnesota. Her disappearance unfolded in a matter of minutes, as her father later told authorities that Karin's 2 older brothers were sent to retrieve her after she had been gone for only about 5 minutes. However, when they arrived at the park, she was nowhere to be found. Despite a frantic search, Karin had vanished without a trace, and after 2 hours of searching, her mother and stepfather officially reported her missing. The only potential clue to her disappearance came from a child playing in the park that evening, who recalled seeing a girl matching Karin's description, speaking with an unidentified man. The girl had been petting the man's dog, though it was never verified that this child was in fact Karin. From the outset of the investigation, suspicion fell heavily on Robert Guevara, a friend of Karin's family who had been a frequent overnight guest in their home. Guevara, who would often stay at their house when he was intoxicated, had a troubling relationship with Karin. Witnesses reported that he sometimes slept in the same bed as the child, and Karin's mother, Mona Williams, later admitted that her daughter had accused Guevara of molesting her on the very day she disappeared. However, Williams did not share this information with police immediately, claiming that she had forgotten about the allegation until several days after Karin had gone missing. As the investigation into Guevara intensified, authorities brought in police dogs, which tracked Karin's scent to Guevara's home. Just 4 days after she vanished, on June 5, 1992, Guevara was charged with kidnapping, rape, and murder. The case against him appeared strong. Inside his locker, police discovered a dress identical to the one Karin had been wearing when she was last seen, as well as a pair of girls' underwear, both of which were stained with blood and semen. Further evidence was found inside Guevara's trailer, where investigators located bloodstains on a shower curtain. DNA testing later confirmed that the biological evidence found in his belongings and home could have come from both Guevara and Karin. Despite this, Guevara's defense team put forth a counterargument, claiming that the evidence could have been planted in his unsecured locker and trailer to frame him. His attorneys went even further, theorizing that Williams may have been involved in her daughter's disappearance, suggesting that she wanted to sell Karin or stage a kidnapping to collect an anticipated ransom. This theory was bolstered by troubling details about Karin's home life. Her family struggled financially, surviving solely on welfare payments, and Williams had a history of drug abuse and emotional instability. Karin and her brother had even spent time in foster care in 1987, shortly after she was born. At the time of Guevara's trial, Minnesota law did not allow for full usage of DNA evidence, a significant factor in the proceedings that ultimately led to his acquittal on all charges. The law has since been revised, but at the time, it meant that despite the physical evidence linking Guevara to Karin, he walked free. He has maintained his innocence ever since. Karin's case remains unsolved, and though she was legally declared dead in 1994, her body has never been found. To this day, her fate remains unknown, leaving behind a haunting mystery that continues to grip those who remember her. Lori Feiner, a resident of Oakdale, Minnesota, lived with her brother and was last seen in the early morning hours of May 9, 1992, under circumstances that would later raise serious concerns. On May 8th, she had received a ride to a friend's home in St. Paul, Minnesota, but at some point during the evening, she stopped at Chuck's Bar on Payne Avenue. It was there that she was observed dancing with 3 men well into the early morning hours. The last confirmed sighting of Lori occurred outside the bar at approximately 1 a.m., where she was seen speaking with one of these men. After that, she was never seen or heard from again, and she never returned to her residence. Her brother, recognizing that her absence was highly uncharacteristic, officially reported her missing on May 12th. Her family was adamant that Lori would never leave without notifying someone, especially given that she had 2 children with whom she shared custody following her recent divorce earlier that same year. Investigators moved quickly to identify the 3 men Lori had interacted with at Chuck's Bar that night. All 3 were described as construction workers, and while they denied any involvement in her disappearance, only 2 of them were able to provide solid alibis for their whereabouts after leaving the bar. The 3rd man, in contrast, could not account for his movements following the encounter with Lori, leaving a significant gap in the timeline. Compounding concerns, Lori had not taken any money or extra clothing with her, suggesting she had no intention of leaving on her own accord. Authorities came to believe that foul play was involved, and her case has since been investigated as a probable homicide. However, despite their efforts, no arrests have ever been made, and Lori's fate remains a mystery. More than 3 decades later, her disappearance remains unsolved, leaving investigators with a case that continues to raise questions about what really happened in those final moments outside Chuck's Bar. Joshua Guimond was born on June 18, 1982, to Lisa and Brian Guimond in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. He was raised in Maple Lake, where he spent a happy childhood. Joshua attended Maple Lake High School, where he excelled academically and socially, earning the title of most likely to succeed among his peers. His leadership qualities shone through, and he was elected class president. Upon graduating, Joshua enrolled at St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, where he pursued his dream of attending law school, possibly leading to a career in politics. Described as intelligent, driven, and well-liked, Joshua had a close-knit circle of friends and a strong bond with his family. His parents divorced at some point, and he gained a stepmother, Barbara Vickerman, who became his mentor until her passing from cancer in 1997. On November 9, 2002, Joshua attended a small gathering at Metten Court, a dormitory on campus, where he and his friends planned to play cards and have a few drinks. Earlier that day, he had been working on a research paper about Alexander Hamilton before meeting up with friends. Arriving at the party around 11:30 p.m., Joshua was seen drinking but was not heavily intoxicated, as confirmed by multiple witnesses. Around midnight, he unexpectedly left the gathering without informing anyone. Most assumed he was heading to the restroom or returning to his own dorm at St. Moore House, just a short 3-minute walk away. However, Joshua never made it back. When Joshua failed to return, his friends initially assumed he had simply gone to bed. But when he missed a mock trial event the next day, a commitment he would never have skipped, concern escalated, and he was reported missing on November 10th. Law enforcement launched an immediate search, speaking with Joshua's friends and retracing his last known steps. A witness later reported seeing someone matching Joshua's description between 12:15 and 12:30 a.m. on the expected route between Metten Court and Street Morehouse. The campus, covering 2,500 acres with lakes and wooded areas, became the focus of the search. Authorities, however, quickly theorized that Joshua had likely fallen into one of the nearby lakes while intoxicated. Despite extensive searches using divers, cadaver dogs, and volunteers on horseback and foot, no evidence of Joshua's presence in the water was ever found. Joshua's father, Brian, became increasingly frustrated with law enforcement's insistence that his son had drowned. Determined to explore all possibilities, he started the Find Joshua Fund, which allowed him to hire the Trident Foundation to conduct a more thorough underwater search in May 2003. Even with advanced sonar technology, nothing was discovered to suggest Joshua was in the lake. Meanwhile, an unexpected development in December 2002 raised new concerns. A scent-tracking dog named Huber, initially working on a separate missing person case involving University of Minnesota student Chris Jenkins, led searchers directly to St. John's Abbey, an area linked to multiple abuse scandals involving monks and priests. When authorities requested access to search inside, they were denied. Later, Huber tracked Joshua sent to a lake behind the abbey, further fueling suspicions of foul play. Adding to the mystery, several troubling incidents had occurred on campus. Reports surfaced of men in cars approaching students, offering rides under false pretenses and attempting abductions. Some victims described being lured into vehicles only to be propositioned for sexual favors before narrowly escaping. Joshua himself had been outspoken about misconduct at St. John's Abbey and was rumored to be writing a paper on the subject before his disappearance. His father strongly believes Joshua may have met with violence, possibly at the hands of those connected to the Abbey or someone he encountered on his way home. Further complicating the case, investigators discovered that over 300 files had been deleted from Joshua's computer after he disappeared. These files were later recovered and reportedly linked to a fake ID operation, but it remains unclear whether Joshua deleted them himself or if someone else had accessed his computer. Adding to the strangeness, music was manually played and skipped through on his computer at a time when Joshua was known to be at the party, raising questions about who was in his dorm room that night. In recent years, authorities have released images of unidentified men found on Joshua's computer, seeking the public's help in identifying them. Law enforcement continues to investigate all leads, and Joshua's father remains committed to uncovering the truth. Over the years, frustration has mounted as law enforcement seemed to dismiss alternative theories too quickly. Brian Guimond has tirelessly pursued every avenue, hiring private investigators and pushing for independent searches when official efforts failed. One of the most perplexing elements in Joshua's case is that even though multiple searches of the lake were conducted, including those with high-tech sonar equipment, no trace of his body was ever found. This fact alone raises serious doubts about the drowning theory that law enforcement originally proposed. Additionally, Joshua's case shares eerie similarities with other disappearances of young men from Minnesota campuses around the same time. Some have speculated about a potential connection to the so-called smiley face killer theory, which suggests that a group of serial offenders may have been targeting college-age men and dumping them in bodies of water to make their deaths appear accidental. While this theory remains controversial, it continues to be explored by independent investigators. Brian Guimond has also questioned whether Joshua's academic work may have played a role in his disappearance. At the time, Joshua had been researching the history of St. John's Abbey and its scandals, a topic that was considered sensitive within the community. Could his research have led him to uncover something that put him in danger? The fact that the scent dog led searchers to the Abbey only deepened suspicions about this possibility. Over 2 decades later, Joshua's family is still searching for answers. They have marked every anniversary of his disappearance with renewed calls for justice, refusing to let his case fade into obscurity. If Joshua is alive, his family wants nothing more than to bring him home. If he met with foul play, they are determined to see justice served. Anyone with information about Joshua's disappearance is urged to contact the Stearns County Sheriff's Office at 320-259-3700. Even the smallest tip could finally provide the breakthrough needed to solve this enduring mystery. The Guimond family remains hopeful that one day, the truth about Joshua's fate will be uncovered, bringing closure to those who have spent the last 20 years searching for him. Christopher Matthew Kerze, known by family and friends as Chris or Rico, was born on February 19, 1973, to his parents, Looney and Jim Kerze. He was the eldest of 3 sons, with younger brothers Tim and Patrick. The Kerze family lived in Eagan, Minnesota, a city in Dakota County known for its parks, particularly Lebanon Hills Regional Park. Christopher had a passion for the outdoors, frequently going on camping trips with his family, and he enjoyed skiing, laser tag, and being a part of his school's varsity swim team, which he had joined as a freshman. Aside from his love for sports, he was also an avid reader and had an interest in computers. He played the clarinet and was a student at Henry Sibley High School, later renamed Two Rivers High School. Despite his diverse interests, Christopher was known for being somewhat shy and reserved, preferring a small group of close friends rather than a large social circle. However, he was well-liked and described as kind to everyone he met. Academically, Christopher excelled and was recognized as a National Merit Scholar semifinalist. He was even invited to join the National Honor Society, demonstrating his dedication to his education. His father, Jim, described him as someone who, once he set his mind to something, would follow through completely. On the morning of April 20th, 1990, 17-year-old Christopher told his mother that he had an intense headache and wanted to stay home from school. Since he rarely missed class and took his education seriously, his mother believed that he must have truly been unwell. His father was away on a business trip, leaving his mother, Looney, to make the decision. Although she offered to stay home with him, Christopher reassured her that he would be fine, so she gave him some pain medicine and left for work. When she returned home later that day, something fell off immediately. She noticed that the family's blue 1988 Dodge Caravan was missing, and their dog, B.W. Bowser, was outside running loose, which was unusual since he was never left unattended. Concerned, she searched the house and found that Christopher was not there, but he had left behind a note. It read, "Mom, something important came up, plus feeling somewhat better. Back by 6. Love, Chris." The fact that he had underlined the word lost twice was initially puzzling to some, but Looney believed it was an inside joke within the family, as Christopher, being a relatively new driver, often got lost. In 1990, GPS was not readily available, and it was common to get turned around, even in familiar areas. However, the note provided no real indication of where he had gone. As the hours passed and Christopher did not return, Looney began to worry. She called her husband, who decided to cut his business trip short and come home immediately. At midnight, the Kerzes attempted to report Christopher missing, but authorities told them they needed to wait 24 hours before filing an official report. They complied, though the delay left them feeling helpless, especially given how critical the first hours of a missing person case can be. The following day, a letter postmarked from Duluth, Minnesota, arrived at their home. The letter, seemingly written by Christopher, revealed that he had faked his illness to stay home from school so he could take the family van and drive to not even I know where. He expressed regret, stating that he intended to take his own life. The letter read, "Take heart, because if just one person is better off for having known me, my life will not have been wasted." The Kerzes were devastated, grappling with the uncertainty of whether Christopher was still alive. There had been no clear warning signs that he was struggling with depression, and if he had been contemplating suicide, he had not shared those feelings with his family. The letter did confirm that he had been in Duluth, offering a possible lead. Soon after, another discovery was made. Christopher had withdrawn $200 from his savings account before leaving home. Additionally, his younger brother, Patrick, realized that their father's Mossberg and son's 20-gauge shotgun was missing. However, when they checked the location where ammunition was stored, they found that it was all still there, meaning Christopher had taken the gun, but no shells. On April 22nd, 2 days after he vanished, authorities located the family van abandoned in a wooded area near the Continental Divide Wayside Rest on Highway 38, close to Grand Rapids, Minnesota. This was near where Christopher's grandparents lived, but they stated they had not seen or heard from him. Inside the van, nothing seemed out of place, but the keys had been left inside, along with a note identifying the vehicle's owner. Law enforcement searched the area, using cadaver dogs that followed a scent trail for about a mile into the woods before it abruptly ended, yielding no further clues. Authorities later spoke to a witness who claimed to have picked up a hitchhiker resembling Christopher and given him a ride to Duluth, suggesting he may have left the van near Grand Rapids before heading northeast. If this account was accurate, it raised more questions than answers. A bizarre element of the case occurred about a week after Christopher disappeared. The Kerzes and their neighbors, who were also the parents of Christopher's best friend, began receiving anonymous phone calls. The caller never spoke, but background noise suggested they were at a lively gathering, with music and conversations audible. Every time someone tried to communicate with the caller, the line would abruptly disconnect. These mysterious calls continued sporadically for 6 months before ceasing entirely. The family strongly believed that Christopher was the one making the calls, though they could never prove it. Years later, a hunter in a rural Minnesota area found a discarded shotgun matching the description of the one Christopher had taken. Unfortunately, authorities could not definitively verify if it had belonged to the Kerze family. In 2004, the Eagan Police Department received an anonymous letter from Seattle, Washington, referring to Christopher as a guardian angel and urging authorities to stop searching, insisting that he would return when he was ready. However, the letter was widely regarded as a hoax. Law enforcement has long suspected that Christopher took his own life soon after leaving home, but without definitive evidence, his family continues to hold out hope. They have kept the same phone number since 1990 in case he ever tries to contact them. His disappearance gained renewed attention in 2016 following the resolution of the Jacob Wetterling case, leading authorities to revisit Christopher's case and re-examine old leads. Despite extensive efforts, no new information surfaced. If Christopher Kerze is still alive today, he would be 51 years old. He is a Caucasian male with brown hair and brown eyes, standing 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing approximately 135 pounds at the time of his disappearance. He wore either hard contact lenses or blue wire-rimmed glasses and had a 1-inch scar on his forehead near his hairline, as well as a small red birthmark on the bottom of his foot. His last known outfit included an acid-washed denim trench coat, a black sweatshirt, blue or black Bugle Boy jeans with knee pockets, a black leather belt, white crew socks, JCPenney underwear, brown leather-bowed shoes, and a plastic Swatch watch with a zebra-striped band. Christopher's case was also featured in the music video for Runaway Train by Soul Asylum, which highlighted missing children and teens in an effort to bring them home. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Christopher Kerze, please contact the Eagan Police Department at 651-675-5700 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. Donna Ingersoll was last seen in Wabasha, Minnesota, on December 16, 1990. That night, 5 people, including herself, were inside the house where she was staying. Witnesses reported that Ingersoll had been drinking alcohol and became involved in a physical argument with her boyfriend, Gary Murphy. The altercation escalated, and she was last seen running out of the back door at approximately 11:45 p.m. into the freezing night. She has never been seen or heard from again. Notably, she did not take her purse, vehicle, glasses, or any money with her when she disappeared. The temperatures that night were brutally cold, and she was not wearing a coat, raising concerns about her ability to survive the harsh weather conditions. Despite extensive searches conducted in the surrounding area, no clues about her whereabouts were uncovered. Following her disappearance, Murphy appeared despondent and checked himself into a treatment center, where he remained for 2 months. His behavior in the aftermath of Ingersoll's vanishing raised questions, though it was never confirmed whether he was directly involved in her disappearance. In the summer of 1991, Murphy died by suicide, deepening the mystery surrounding Ingersoll's fate. Some who knew them personally insisted that their relationship was strong, and one of Ingersoll's friends expressed disbelief that Murphy would have harmed her. However, authorities have not ruled out the possibility that she never actually left the house that night and may have met with foul play inside the residence. This theory remains under investigation. At the time of her disappearance, Ingersoll was living in Hammond, Minnesota. She was a graduate of Rochester John Marshall High School and later joined the Army Reserves. She had been working at a packing company before she went missing. Authorities believe foul play may have been involved in her case, but despite years of investigation, no solid leads have materialized. More than 3 decades later, Donna Ingersoll remains missing. Investigators urge anyone with information to come forward in hopes of finally uncovering the truth about what happened that fateful December night in 1990. Nathan Edberg was last seen on April 14, 1999, after leaving Decoy's Bar and Grill on 4th Street in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. Witnesses at the bar could not recall the exact time he departed. Shortly after he left, his pickup truck was discovered abandoned in a ditch at the intersection of Interstate 694 and Interstate 35E, near Little Canada. Edberg was nowhere to be found at the scene, and no evidence of foul play was apparent. However, authorities did note a series of footprints leading east from the truck. Investigators determined that it appeared as though he had missed a turn on the highway and accidentally driven into the ditch. He has not been seen or heard from since. The bartender at Decoy's, who was familiar with Edberg as a regular, recalled that he arrived at the bar around 7:30 p.m. that evening and ordered a beer. He noted that Edberg seemed to be in an unusually good mood compared to his previous visits. However, despite his outward demeanor that night, Edberg was known to have been going through a difficult period in his life. At the time of his disappearance, he was struggling with several personal issues. His parents were in the process of divorcing. He had recently lost his job, and he had also ended a 4-year relationship with his girlfriend. He was living with his cousin while trying to navigate these challenges. His parents initially did not report him missing, believing he needed time alone to process his troubles. It was only after they discovered that his truck had been sitting in an impound lot for several days that they became alarmed. Realizing they had not heard from him, they filed a missing person report. Authorities conducted an investigation but found no further clues as to his whereabouts. Edberg, who had been a resident of Van Ness Heights, Minnesota, in 1999, had graduated from White Bear Lake High School in 1996 and attended college for a year before leaving school. Since his disappearance, there has been no activity on his bank accounts or credit cards. While authorities consider his case a missing persons investigation, as there is no conclusive evidence of foul play, the mystery of what happened to him remains unresolved. His father passed away in 2001, but his mother continues to search for answers. The case remains open, and law enforcement urges anyone with relevant information to come forward. The Ramsey County Sheriff's Office can be contacted at 651-266-7320 for any tips or leads. Dell Jensen was last seen in the early morning hours of November 18, 2015, in downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota. That night, she had been out with her boyfriend, Joshua Louis Dwayne Dow, the father of their 2-year-old daughter. Dow later told authorities that he, Jensen, and his brother had spent time at the downtown cabaret, and after the club closed, they saw her walking away down the street. They tried to convince her to get into the car with them to go home, but she refused, and that was the last confirmed sighting of her. At the time of her disappearance, Jensen had recently left Dow, taking their daughter with her to live with her parents in Carver County, Minnesota. She had just completed her studies at Dunwoody College of Technology, was employed as a radiology technician, and was saving money to move in her own apartment while preparing to enroll her daughter in preschool. A few days after Jensen went missing, Dow was taken into custody on suspicion of her murder after his brother provided a damning statement to police, alleging that Jensen was dead and that he had helped Dow dispose of her body. According to Dow's brother, who lived with him at their Minneapolis duplex, he had been asleep on the morning of November 18th when he was awakened at around 5 a.m. by the sound of a gunshot. When he asked Dow about it, Dow claimed he had dropped the firearm and it discharged accidentally. The brother went back to sleep, but later that day, around noon, he woke up to find Dow and a friend, who has since passed away, removing a blood-stained sofa from the duplex. Jensen's body, wrapped in plastic resembling material used at the warehouse where Dow and his brother worked, was also inside the residence. Cell phone records placed Dow at the warehouse at 7:20 a.m. that morning. When questioned, Dow initially claimed that Jensen had died by suicide, but he then held a gun to his brother's head, threatening to kill him and their mother unless he helped dispose of her body, clean up the crime scene, and maintain the story that Jensen had gone missing voluntarily. The three men loaded the couch into the friend's van, later cutting it into pieces and scattering the fragments in various locations. Dow's brother also disposed of the .38 caliber revolver, which Dow claimed had been used in Jensen's death. Police later recovered the weapon. Dow proceeded to conceal Jensen's remains inside a box, sealing it before painting over the bloodstains in the duplex. He and his brother moved the box containing her body to the warehouse. On November 19th, after Jensen had been reported missing, the brothers transferred the remains to a storage closet at their workplace. When police searched the warehouse, they did not recover a body, but they did detect the strong odor of decomposition. One of Dow's co-workers recalled seeing him at the warehouse on the morning of November 22nd, washing plastic sheeting and moving boxes with a cart. Shortly afterward, another witness observed Dow pushing a large box from the warehouse's loading dock into a Chevrolet pickup truck, the same truck Jensen had rented for Dow's brother before she disappeared. When questioned by police, Dow claimed that Jensen had shot herself on his couch following an argument in which he tried to end their relationship. He stated that he believed she had wanted to frame him for her death and send him to prison, so he decided to dispose of her body rather than report the incident. Dow admitted to dismembering her remains at the warehouse and disposing of them in multiple garbage bins throughout the city. Unfortunately, by the time police were able to act on this information, the trash had already been collected and discarded. Investigators later uncovered a series of text messages between Dow and Jensen from November 11th to November 22nd, revealing a pattern of escalating conflict that had turned physical. In one message, after Jensen expressed a desire to leave the area by purchasing a plane ticket, Dow threatened that he would gain full custody of their daughter and that she would never see her child again. Although Dow was initially arrested on suspicion of murder, he was instead charged with second-degree assault with a dangerous weapon and interference with a dead body. In February 2016, he pleaded guilty to the charge of concealing a body, as well as an unrelated drug offense, and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. While serving his sentence, new charges were brought against him in May 2019, this time for second-degree murder in connection with Jensen's death. In December 2019, Dow ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree unintentional murder, admitting that he had been responsible for Jensen's death and had concealed her body to cover up the crime. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Authorities firmly believe foul play was involved in Jensen's case, given the extensive efforts to cover up her death. Despite conducting an exhaustive search of 60 to 100 tons of waste in an attempt to recover her remains, investigators were unable to locate them. To this day, Dell Jensen's body has never been found. Sean Hess was last seen in Brainerd, Minnesota, on February 26, 2002, near the intersection of Oak Street and South 8th Street. Witnesses reported that he was walking in an east-southeast direction at the time of his disappearance. There were indications that Hess may have been under the influence of drugs and alcohol when he vanished. 2 days later, on February 28th, his family officially reported him missing after realizing they had not heard from him. Authorities checked his apartment, located in the 1100 block of South 6th Street, and found it untouched with all of his personal belongings, including clothing, identification, and medication, left behind. A review of his bank account showed no activity since his disappearance in February 2002. 3 months later, in May 2002, authorities discovered a jacket matching the description of Hess's parka near a swamp east of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad shops, close to Highways 210 and 25 in Brainerd. Further searches uncovered additional items of clothing, including pants, shoes, socks, and a shirt, scattered along a progressive path following the railroad tracks. Based on these findings, investigators theorized that Hess may have succumbed to hypothermia, a condition that can lead to severe disorientation and paradoxical undressing, where victims shed their clothing despite freezing conditions. Despite multiple extensive searches, no trace of Hess's remains was ever found. The terrain in the search area was particularly challenging, consisting of rough, swampy, and bog-covered ground, making it possible that searchers could have been within feet of him without realizing it. Given the lack of new evidence, Hess's family held a memorial service for him later in 2002, acknowledging their loss while still hoping to recover his remains one day. His case remains open, and authorities continue to urge anyone with information to come forward. Germaine Hunter was last seen in Forest Lake, Minnesota, on April 6, 2012, the same day he ended his 12-year relationship with Annette Greer. Following the breakup, Hunter vanished without a trace and has never been heard from again. His family, growing increasingly worried, officially reported him missing about 3 weeks later. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance quickly raised suspicions. Several days after the missing person report was filed, a backpack containing some of Hunter's personal documents was discovered discarded in a trash bin in Lino Lakes, Minnesota. When questioned, Greer admitted to dumping the backpack, claiming she did so out of concern for identity theft. At the time of his disappearance, Hunter had been living with Greer and her brother, Aaron Ross. Notably, Ross had recently accused Hunter of sexually abusing his daughter, and Hunter went missing shortly after being confronted about the allegations. However, law enforcement conducted an investigation into Ross's claim and found no evidence to substantiate it. While it remains unclear whether Hunter's disappearance is connected to the accusations, suspicions arose within Ross's own family. One of his sisters publicly expressed her belief that Ross was responsible for Hunter's murder. Both Ross and Greer have been classified as persons of interest in the case. In the years following Hunter's disappearance, Ross was convicted of burglary and sent to prison, while Greer relocated to Wisconsin. Despite thorough searches and inquiries, no definitive evidence of foul play was found at Hunter's residence, though authorities have stated that he vanished under suspicious circumstances. His family remains adamant that it is highly uncharacteristic of him to sever all contact, reinforcing their belief that something terrible happened to him. More than a decade later, Hunter's fate remains an enduring mystery, and his case remains unsolved. Daniel Huling was last seen visiting various taverns along Chestnut Street in Virginia, Minnesota, on the day of his disappearance, though he was last definitively sighted inside one of the establishments before he vanished without a trace. At the time, he was working seasonally at a resort in Babbitt, Minnesota, collecting unemployment benefits between November and March. He signed his last unemployment check on February 10, 2003, but never collected the additional funds owed to him for the following month. Additionally, he was supposed to return to work on April 1st but never showed up, raising concern among those who knew him. His parents revealed that he had been facing financial difficulties prior to his disappearance, adding another layer of worry. Huling's employer, troubled by his absence and inability to reach him, went to his residence only to find that his phone had been disconnected. What he saw at the home was deeply unsettling. There were no footprints in the snow outside, and inside, it appeared as if no one had been there for weeks. More concerning was that Huling's essential items, including his eyeglasses, cash, and winter coats, were left behind, suggesting he had not left voluntarily or at least had not planned for an extended absence. Huling's parents strongly believe he was murdered, although investigators maintain that there is no definitive evidence of foul play. Despite this, authorities acknowledge that foul play is a real possibility given the unusual circumstances of his disappearance. His parents also disclosed that he had been struggling with drug and alcohol issues at the time, potentially placing him in risky situations or dangerous company. Huling was known as a sociable and talkative individual who enjoyed playing darts and pool and had a passion for singing karaoke. His sudden disappearance remains an enduring mystery. Though the years have passed, the case remains unsolved, and anyone with information is urged to come forward in the hope of shedding light on what truly happened to Daniel Huling.